Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of This Full Life. So, this month, as you know, we are talking about change, the aspects of change, what shows up in our life when we decide to make changes. The last 2 weeks, we have covered identifying the areas in our life that we are ready to change and the areas that are ready to be changed. We've talked about what it means to commit to this change. We've talked about what these changes are that we're going to make, how sabotage shows up for us when we are on the road of change. Today, we are going to continue this talk of change and riff about triggers and what that means when we're making changes in our life. So I know that you've noticed when we really commit to making big changes, so many things show up, from the physical aspect in your body to the external life that you lead. So many triggers show up, and that is what we're going to talk about today. I have a fabulous guest on today, Amy Guerrero. She is a radical recovery coach and founder of Regrooven, a lifestyle that begins with a 12-week transformation that tunes you into your Regrooven life. It results in a more powerful, purposeful, and fully realized recovered life. Amy teaches you to have healthier relationships, more abundance, and way more fun. Amy is a compulsive creator and an enthusiastic seeker committed to sharing her story while helping you thrive in the recovered life that you want to create. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tara. What an honor it is to be here with you and just be a part of this conversation, because it is such an important conversation. And I love talking about everything that you create and that you share with the world. So I'm
Thank
just
you.
honored to be here with you.
Thank you. And so before we get started with talking about all the triggers that can come in when we commit to a change, tell us about you. Tell us about how you came about to be teaching this Regrooven lifestyle that you teach.
Yeah, that's I'll keep a very long story in a short amount of time here. One thing that we really concentrate on in a recovery lifestyle is staying out of the mess and in the message. And that's what I'm here to really share with you today. I'm in recovery, and I've been helping people my whole life. You know, when I had a lemonade stand when I was a little kid, there was a joke that I was like Lucy from the Peanuts, because you didn't come get lemonade from Amy, the little redhead on the corner. You went to get advice from Amy.
That's awesome. I love it.
So, you know, I think my purpose was clear to me when I was a young child, but I also came from some trauma. And my way to understand the trauma as a child was to, when triggered, was to create an imagination, an escape mechanism through fantasy and through imagination. So I had a deep, understanding of how to escape the feelings that I was feeling. Mm-hmm. And as I grew up, I discovered that wasn't working as well for me, because I had too many cognitive adults telling me that I was lying, or that I couldn't live in that fantasy world anymore. So I had to come up with another way to protect myself. And when I found alcohol and drugs, that became a much easier substance filter to put into my body to escape. And so, you know, I'm not going to say that it didn't work for a really long time. You know, it did the job, but in the meantime, it was cutting me off from connection. I was connecting through a substance. And although, I mean, I'm not going to lie and say I didn't have a great time, but when I really decided to commit to my life, and actually before I turned 40, I went on this discovery process to really unravel my trauma and figure out healthier ways to deal with it and figure out the root of where it came from. I was consistently triggered, and consistently, because I am just this enthusiastic seeker, I was consistently seeking, my birth mom, all of this abuse that happened to me. I wanted to know how and why, and I was very curious as a seeker. And the deeper that I started to discover, even though I had all of these spiritual practices and all of these, I was teaching yoga, I was, coaching, I had my own business, I was doing all of I had a spiritual advisor, a therapist, I had a lot of tools, but the tool that really helped me through this was alcohol. And in 2013, I woke up one day and I was shaking. And I knew that something had gotten a hold of me. And all of those triggers that were happening in my life were so intense that the only thing that would take it away was that substance. And when my body became physically addicted to the substance, it was, I want to stay out of the mess, but I can tell you that I was hospitalized at least 40 times in a span of a year and a half. I started getting sober. My first sobriety date was in May of 2014. And I'm happy to say that this month in June, I'll have 2 consecutive years of sobriety.
Congratulations.
So yeah, that is, a short story of how I got here. But when, I was already coaching people, and when I discovered that one of the reasons it was so hard for me to embrace this sober lifestyle without any filters is it looked like a lot of basements, church basements, a lot of cigarette smoking, a lot of, meetings where there was a lot of shame and guilt, and that's not who I am. And I really want people to see that a fully recovered life can look like this. And when I embraced that and I started helping people overcome their daily triggers in recovery, I knew that Regrooven needed to be born. Not needed to, but it's my calling to do this and my ultimate act of service, Tara.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for being of service. Thank you for sharing your journey and your story, and for being so vulnerable with us, because I feel through our journeys, the more vulnerable that we are, the more it awakens and allows everyone else to be so connected, because we are all here with all of our imperfections and all of our seeming shortcomings. And we're all just trying to be us on a daily basis. And so I know that the more that we take off our shields and take off our masks and talk about how real life looks, I know the more that we can heal ourselves and we can heal everyone else that's around us to learn from us.
Yeah. That's my purpose, is to expand in the abundance and inspire others to want to do the same.
Let's dig into triggers, because triggers come from everywhere. They can happen on a small little scale. They can happen on a really big scale. And so what I love about triggers are that it's really up for us. We have everyone else around us, situations and people that are our triggers, but what the trigger is, we utilize it to find out what that piece in us is that hasn't been healed. So I want to just make sure that our listeners that are watching and listening are really clear that a trigger isn't meaning someone else is bothering you, or that it's someone else's fault, or that we're finger pointing at someone else. The trigger is actually the gift, even though we sometimes don't look at it that way. The trigger is a gift of finding what's within us that needs to be healed. And I also want to be very clear, because triggers for me probably come up 30 times a day. It's really what we do with it. I mean, I'll find a trigger of wanting to judge someone who wasn't driving fast enough for me on the street, or that wasn't walking fast enough in the store, or, and it's just that reminder. It could be a simple reminder to slow down, or it could be a really big trigger for us. So let's talk about, now that we've cleared that up, what, let's talk about it. And you said that you had all these different triggers. So let's just dive in to give us some of your examples as well. And when you started recognizing for the first time that maybe these were about me and not everyone else.
Ooh, that's a great one. I think that I took on, it was about me and not everyone else really young, because that was part of my trauma. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong and everyone else is doing it right. So my triggers were a little bit in the reverse, right? It was like, I can't do this because I might trigger that in them and then they won't take care of me. Yeah. And so the way that my experience, and this is great, you guys like that are listening, this, one thing that I really, a place I come from is that there are obstacles that we get to overcome. And I'm grateful in the moment. I'm like, oh, thank you for this obstacle to overcome. And that shift of perspective on, being triggered helps me shift into my side of it, right? Like what can I do to react differently, transformatively in this situation? Because the only thing at the end of the day that I teach and that the Regroovan lifestyle lives is that we're only responsible for how we react. And that's a lot of responsibility for every human being.
It really is. Because it's way easier to point the finger at someone else, right?
Yeah, totally. And I have been, like I said, I've been at this spiritual seeking for a really long time. I was introduced to teachers like Carolyn Miss and Louise Hay when I was really young. And no one around me was having this conversation. But I heard them talking about this victim archetype and in showing up in a different way, and could really start to see that, to answer your question of what is it that I can do and not see it in others. Now, it did result in me being a bit of a codependent, Tara.
Yeah, because I think we all still have those little pieces of us, even though we have worked on that, in such a big way of not being codependent. And that's actually a whole nother chapter. But yeah, I think we all still recognize those little pieces within us of being that codependent person.
Yeah. And, because I think let's just talk about like the physicality, right, of what a trigger does. So I'll talk about it from my first person perspective. Now, you guys, everyone's going to have a different perspective of what it feels like, but something happens. Well, we'll use your example. You're driving down the road and someone cuts you off. That happens to me. I get tight in my shoulders, my jaw starts to clench, my stomach tightens up, and I feel like I need to do something, and I'm triggered. It can go a number of ways in that moment, and it's so fast. So am I going to hold my breath? Am I going to be conscious and take a deep breath? Am I going to yell? Am I going to turn my music up and scream? What am I going to do in that moment? Because I had absolutely no control over that person triggering me. And triggering not only the mental, but the physical in my body. Because that's how it starts in my experiences, is like my body feels it. And then I assign all of this meaning to it in my brain. Because my frontal cortex, right, it thinks it's so smart. And it wants to go, remember that time, and it wants to bring all the past in and all the future. I could have gotten in a car accident, all the future that hasn't happened yet. So it's my work, it's my gift, it's my obstacle to overcome, to take a deep breath, to sing a little louder, often to scream. I love to just go, ah! Because it releases that energy from the body, and therefore the trigger loses its energy. So that's some of the things that I practice, but like I progress, not perfection.
Right. And I love it. And I love how you broke it down so simplistically, because we can all 100% relate to that example, which is a great example. And then take that example into your life and realize, is this, as much as we attempt to have the boundaries in our life and have the control, and I don't mean control as in, tight reins. I mean the control as in, these are my boundaries, this is my lifestyle, this is how I choose to live. The triggers are going to come. It's what we do with them. And so I love how you broke that down for us to physically feel in our body what it feels like. And I know for me, yes, it is a tightening of the chest, and my stomach gets tight and I grab onto the wheel. And my brain wants to take over and tell me, I got this, girl. I got this for you. Right. And then, and curse at whomever it is that's cutting me off or whatever. And then it even wants to be verbal about it. Right. And so I recognize what comes in just in that example. So we'll take that example and then take it further into a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so again, we have no control of what anyone else says to us ever. We can express to them how we want to be spoken to, or, create the boundaries of, hey, we're in this relationship and this is how I prefer to be. I would love for you to talk to me this way. But when they're triggered, right, they are doing the best that they can, whatever that looks like for them. And so bringing in that practice, actually, even practice in the car in a situation like that is a simple practice. Because really no one else is affected unless you're a road rager. No one else is affected by your experience in that moment. It's just you in the car. So it's really good practice for when you're in front of another human being.
Yeah.
Because you get to decide in that moment how you choose to be as a human with someone else. Right. And so using an example as, or with a partner, with a sibling, with a parent, with someone who's close to you that is having a bad day, they're having a bad day, or maybe you don't know they're having a bad day. And they say something really snarky because they are already triggered. They're in their own stuff right now. Really, it has nothing to do with you, but we've been triggered. Right. And so it's recognizing that moment in your body. And this is, again, a practice. Like you said, it's always a practice. I don't know that we will ever become proficient in instantaneously recognizing that trigger and going, oh, I got this. Wouldn't we love it? And so, yeah, recognizing the physical reaction, the emotional reaction, and then choosing. Most of the time when we are triggered, we want to react from that instantaneous place of vomiting back out to put up our own shield, to protect ourselves. And so the gift of the trigger is that there's something underlying for us that we get to find out. And we don't even have to find it out in that moment, right? It can be 5-10 minutes later, an hour, 2 hours later. It's the recognition of, ugh, that kind of pulled something up.
Yeah, totally, Tara. And you said so many things that I would love to comment on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, you said it's a choice and we get to decide. And I want to just say that over and over and over to your listeners, to my listeners, that is a Regroove lifestyle. It's to choose, we choose this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just in that alone there's so much freedom and
mm-hmm.
so much freeness to have a fresh perspective and to look at things in a way that that do give you that empowerment of that. And for me, in the way that I, as a yoga teacher and as someone who studied interpersonal communication in university, it's everything is a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so important to my fulfillment in life. and to have the gift of these feelings, right? It starts in I know, like, as evolved human beings, we forget that we're animals.
Right.
We are animals, like, I spend a lot of time talking about the limbic system and our sense of smell and listening and music, and those all excite our animal part of our brain, the amygdala. And that's where we get excited with a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So it is all about what you just said too. It's like, the more we practice in the car, the more we practice on our yoga mat, the more we practice with ourselves, because I can trigger myself. I don't know about you, but
completely.
Real
Yes.
talk. Yeah, like, I will just be walking down I'll be on a hike and be like, you're doing it wrong, or a bird comes down and it's, my thoughts can trigger me.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we don't know what's going on with the other person. So the more conscious that I can choose to be in my skin with my thoughts, in my interactions, then the better I don't love the words best or better, but the more I can show up in a space. You talked a lot about, creating those boundaries, and it's like a container of life, that's permeable. And that goes both ways. Boundaries, I think we get a little confused, and you've probably talked about it in other episodes this month, but boundaries are not meant to be like thick walls that we can't get through. They're permeable, beautiful spaces where the other person really knows that I love and respect myself. And therefore, that's not going to work for me right now. And as an empowered, awesome woman that lives a regrooving lifestyle, I have the right to change my mind whenever I want. And everyone who's listening, please know you have the right to change your mind whenever you want. And changing your mind when you're triggered, that's what it is, right? Like, you can't necessarily change the fact that your body clenched up, but you can change your mind. And emotions are energy in motion. And so when that car comes out, or let's just real talk it, like, when you get that text message from the person closest to you in your life that you have the most intimacy from, that says something that I don't even know, it could bring up something from your childhood and you don't even know, but they're having their own experience. So you have the choice in that moment of how you're going to react to that beautiful obstacle to overcome, to learn about yourself. And another thing that you mentioned on is to stay curious, Tara. That is the business. That is the game of life. And that's why I focus so much on having fun. Because when I'm in my child, I have a hashtag and a URL that I have had for years called Play More, It's Fun. And if we can play more with our triggers and stay curious and, stay out of the judgment and that mind judgment, because it's just, 80% of our thoughts are negative and 90% of them are the same.
Right.
I don't remember the exact numbers at this moment, but it's pretty incredible. So it's like, if we play with it, if we stay curious about it, then that opens up a lot of choice for both us and the other person.
And I love that you're talking about the curious piece. And so for many people who this may be super new to, about being curious about triggers and hearing about triggers, and, well, really, I just want to get mad. The curiosity piece means, what is it that's triggering me? Why do I feel like I need to get mad? Going way deeper than, well, she just cut me off, that's why I'm mad. So in that specific moment, or she just sent me a text, or he just sent me a text and he said, blah, whatever it was. So it's getting more curious and getting in a deeper space to see what is there for us. Why is this making me mad? And when you're on this journey of discovery and curiosity, it really becomes easier because you're creating this habit, right? You're creating these new neurons, these new pathways in your brains that actually start responding in a faster way to that piece of curiosity versus how you might have been trained your whole life to just react with anger. So once you start what's the word? Regrooving with these triggers. Yeah, your brain will actually start responding from that place of curiosity versus that place of anger. And it's so interesting when the chatter starts quieting down as well. I mean, for me, it's there all the time. It's just not as loud as it used to be, or just not as prominent, or just not as immediate, or I will catch it in that nanosecond and push that one aside and let the other one come in of like, well, what was that about for me?
Yeah.
Versus just wanting to come from the place of attacking or making sure that the other person knows how wrong they are so that we know how right we are. And I giggle because how many times do we want to do that?
Yeah. And, because I thank you for reminding me too, like I'm super blessed with all of the obstacles that I've had to overcome, especially through addiction and facing suicide literally 2 years ago. This week, 2 years ago, this week, I was in a house trying to kill myself with drugs and alcohol. So I forget sometimes what a blessing it is to have been through these experiences and these obstacles, to remember that it's not always easy. And our old defense mechanisms, they had me trying to just end my life and not just, but embrace the triggers, embrace the things that were happening. Instead, it was like, no, I'm done. So like, what are the simple things that we can do to transform those little habits and tell our listeners to do? Because like all the work that I've done over my whole lifetime has shown me a lot of rituals and habits and awareness and fun to have with it to I say, and this is a fun, playful way, but I say it to arrest the thought. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like when I'm with a client and we're talking about things, I'm like, oh, let's catch that one. And let's write it down. And then we've made it, we've caught the thought in the moment. And then we wrote it down. So we released its energy from it. And now we're going to do exactly what you just said and create that new neuro pathway to create a new loop to regroove the thought process. And you're totally 100%. And I love what you said about that. Listen, again, I cannot control how many hundreds of thousands of thoughts go through my head a day, but boy, do I know how to turn the volume down through the practice of these small habits and rituals. And you guys, Tara and I can both tell you that when you practice them over and over again, they just become automatic responses, just like, putting your hand up before you fall. It becomes that way. And that's how those triggers are just less loud. Like someone cuts you off and then celebrating it, right? Like someone cuts you off and you react differently. And then you're like, yeah, I did that just now. And so because we are animals, we need that reward system, that dopamine response to our new, great, awesome habits that are working for us today. So I think it's very important for us to remember, and for our listeners to remember, like having a little private party when you do something transformative or you change something is totally, completely fun and necessary.
I agree with you. And sometimes I've given myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm high-fiving myself for whatever it was that I've been working on that like all of a sudden shifted in such a big way. And it could have been that little simple, I didn't yell at somebody that was driving, or I didn't like wish her bad thoughts. It was just oh gosh, she just cut me off. And I went on and I thought, oh my God, like I didn't react how I did. And it was a little party in the car of high-fiving myself and then moving on, because you're so right. We have to have fun. We don't have to have fun. It's choice to be in that fun space, right? Because the more fun we are having, the more that the universe shows us fun, the easier our life becomes. The easier it becomes to see these triggers. Yeah, and I love that we have mentioned as well several times about our childhood, because as many times growing up as we had, and I certainly am not diminishing our childhoods that have been really tumultuous and full of trauma, there have been those little moments of childhood wonderment, of childhood fun, that we can go back to and remember how innocent that felt without all of the weight of the world on our shoulders. And I think as we grow into adults and find ourselves feeling that weight of the world on our shoulders, we've almost forgotten that innocence of childhood, which then brings us back to these triggers. And then all the triggers come in, and then we get angry and mad. And it's so easy to react from that place where we have learned to be in anger or frustration or denial. And so it's being able to recognize and then have fun with the place that we came from of, holy crap, I did not just react how I used to. I've chosen a different path. And it's especially fun when you choose to react differently to a partner, to a spouse, to a child, to a loved one. It feels differently in your body. It feels so much better in your body to come from that place of neutrality or not reacting versus the opposite. And it is a domino effect when we are able to react from a different place than when we react from the space of anger or frustration or any of the negativity. Your body physically feels different.
Yeah, I love the word wonderment. And what I hear you saying, which is so profound and really just awesome, is love. It's like that it's almost like we set a boundary within ourselves. Like, I'm going to choose to react differently and therefore love myself. Mm-hmm. Because my cortisol levels are going to be lower. My adrenaline's going to calm down. I'm going to create dopamine with my reward center. Like, there's all these chemical things that go on. And I do come from this holistic coaching background. So I can't, not the science is there. Mm-hmm. We reward ourselves with that. We meet the other person with this expansive love that we're feeling for ourselves when we celebrate and give ourselves that like high five in the car, or I love to sing or move around or just being like, yeah, I did that. Woo. Then I'm loving myself, and the other person or place or stranger, or especially the people that really know us, like everything in my body changes. When I'm meeting it with love, they know. And then it shifts things for them, right? Because we're all energy. And we just shifted the energy within ourselves. And then we shifted it for the other person. And what a gift it is to do that in the grocery store. And to practice it with strangers. Mm-hmm. Because then when you're home and, and you're letting it all hang out, and there's less between you and the other person, there's more love.
Wow. I have loved this conversation. That's been a lot. We have covered a lot. And I love all the different aspects that we've brought in about self-love and making sure that we are taking care of ourselves, because you and I teach so much about, that's pretty much what we teach, is self-love. I mean, I feel like that is the core of what we are teaching. It's the journey to getting to that place to love yourself, because by and large, most of us aren't taught that, man, just love yourself, like just love you, right? It's not that internal thing, it's that external thing. And so, yeah, I love that the conversation just naturally evolved to the place of loving yourself, because that's what it's all about, right? It's all about that self-love, because when you are so loving and caring for yourself, it oozes to everyone else. And that's the place that you come from versus the other place of not being loving to yourself and not being so caring about yourself. And then you come from that place of yuck because you're not caring. And it was actually such a gift for me. It's probably been about a month ago, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Someone very close to me I didn't even know what the conversation was. And they said, well, it's really clear how much you love yourself. I noticed, and I just hit me because the conversation wasn't even on that topic, but I thought, whatever it is that I'm doing is having that ripple effect that people do see, oh, wow, she really loves herself. And so I think it's about everything as well that we have talked about today. It's about the lifestyle that you lead, Amy, that shows other people she loves herself. And this is how it shows up for her in loving herself and taking care of herself and recognizing the triggers that are in our life is actually, as much as we don't want to say it sometimes, is self-love, right? It is acknowledging, because easier said than done. You and I can talk about it all day long, and then we're going to get off of this interview and something is going to happen and we're going to be like, okay. How do I do this?
A fun practice that we often we do too is yell it out, trigger.
Oh, I love it.
It just diffuses it, trigger, so it diffuses it in the moment and makes it more playful. So.
I was just going to say the same thing. That makes it way more fun because first of all, the other person's like, oh God, what was that? Totally. You have 100% diffused whatever that energy was in the room. And it's lessened your anxiety around whatever it was. I'm totally doing this.
Yeah, especially with our friends and family and coworkers even, it's as adults, that wonderment that you talked about earlier, we take ourselves so seriously.
Oh yeah.
And, a great practice that we can really leave our listeners with today is having fun with it that way. It's just take it less seriously and less personally. And if you just go trigger, then everyone stops in their tracks and goes, oh, you're right. And we were about to go down one path, but now we have a choice to go down another path. And it's a path that is met with love and fun.
It is. I love it. And I'm actually already thinking, okay, I'm so bringing this to the family today.
Oh, the kid will love it.
Yeah, because for me personally, we were talking about a small space. We are still in a small apartment after we were out of the country for a while. So we're still in a small apartment. And my middle son has come back to live. His girlfriend is going to come back to stay for a while and her dog. So we are now in this tiny space with all these people. And so, but the good thing is we are just a family of communicators. We talk all the time about, okay, this is really going down, or, this is what it's feeling like. And so I am going to be bringing this to the table of when somebody is having that moment, it makes me giddy to think about trigger.
Yeah, trigger. The dog can be the trigger. You just point at the dog. The poor dog's going to be like, what?
Right. And so it also allows the other person to realize it's not about you. Yes. It's about me.
Yes.
It's about me. I'm having a trigger.
Yeah.
And it's not about you. Even though you caused that trigger, it's my trigger. It's not me reacting to you. It's actually me reacting to me.
Exactly.
And not knowing to do with that piece that just came up in my face.
So powerful right there. And I love it because we just gave, we got really deep and we went to all kinds of places, but we just gave a real life, situation that I'm sure everyone deals with. It's summertime. So, we're getting together more. We're in these spaces with a lot of people that we love. And what a great way to practice this week. Yeah. I do the same. And we get to share it with one another. That's a great place. I'm blessed to know you and to be able to reach out to you and be like, oh my gosh, this happened today. And this is how I did it differently, and celebrate it with another human as well. And, I think one thing that we both talk about a lot is that we are up leveling and vibrating higher, and to find people out there, listeners, that you can do this with, that you can hold each other accountable to start playing a game with triggers and grow closer.
Exactly. And here's what I was going to say on that, because as we keep talking, what keeps going deeper and deeper for me is that, okay, so once you've said trigger and you have released the other person from feeling any sort of responsibility, from feeling any sort of codependency of, oh God, what did I just do? You have released them. They feel no guilt or attachment or, oh God, I shouldn't have said that. You have done so many things. You've taken responsibility for yourself. You've taken the other person's, and maybe the other person isn't as evolved or is feeling triggered in the moment because they've done something that's maybe set you off. And you've also brought the two of you together to do this thing together so that the other person, so neither one of you is finger pointing or blaming or judging. You're actually, even if you don't want to work it right there in that moment, you are both holding space for each other right there in that moment.
That is totally it.
I mean, that feels so super powerful. Even if nothing gets worked out, you have just gone, trigger! You can breathe. Okay, you know what? I'll work on this later. Okay, how can we go through this conversation? Like, you've just acknowledged it. Or you can go the other way of like, okay, I just need to, let me just have a second. It can go however we want it to go. We've said right there in that moment, okay, this was a trigger for me. And that other person literally can hold that space for you. And it's brought you together.
Absolutely. And another really good point in here is that you've given the other person and yourself information. And, I have been studying communication my whole life and really studying communication, but I still don't give, I always told the men I've been with or the relationships I'm in, like, I'm giving you the answers to the test. And that's what you do, is you give people the answers to what triggers Amy, what triggers Tara, what triggers whoever you are. And so they have more information, you have more information to go out there and meet it with love. And I also just really want to point out that it does not have to be processed in the moment, you guys.
Right.
Because if I'm really triggered and, someone wants to process in the moment and I'm not ready for it, and I go into it, then I'm not going into it in a healthy, awesome space for me. I'm doing it in a codependent way to make them happy. And And it does lead to the possibility of negative things coming out later. So always that self-love, that boundary is like, woo, trigger, we figured it out. I need 20 minutes or 2 days or whatever it is. And the other person can receive that or deny that. But again, it's like that coming back to self and what I'm capable of handling right then and there. And that's our conversation, right? Like the triggers are like, ooh, I couldn't handle that. How do I diffuse it? What am I going to do to transform it? And I also love that we both got really emotional over the last 3 or 4 minutes. Like I almost felt like I was going to cry because we did exactly, you guys, this is such a beautiful conversation, Tara, but we did exactly that by having fun with the word trigger. My heart opened. I felt a release. I wanted to cry thinking of how far I've come in my life, how much further I have to go, how beautiful it is that I got to know you and your family a little bit more in that moment. Like I just felt so much love for you. So it's just like, we just did it all real time.
Yeah. Thank you for this today.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was awesome. Awesome work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for the gift of trigger.
Yeah, you got it. My pleasure. I mean, it works. And I teach in groups a lot of times, so we can do it in group, and then it just woo, shifts everything. Like
It
dancing.
feels good.
Yeah.
Okay, Amy, where can anyone that wants to get to know you better find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on the World Wide Web at regroovin, regroovin.com. And I'm offering free 30-minute breakthrough jam sessions right now for people that really want to take their recovery to the next level. And you can book right on my website, and you can get to know me and my story, because it's all in there. And I would love, and I look forward to being of service to you.
Mm, thank you. Thank you so much.
You got it, sister. Great to see you today.